My grandfather left me $500,000 in his will, but my parents demanded I give it all to my favorite sister. Then I discovered he knew the truth, and what happened next broke them. I'm 28 years old. I work in finance at a pretty big firm, and honestly, I need to get this off my chest, because what happened 3 months ago with my grandfather's inheritance basically blew up the entire family dynamic. I'd been dragging around since I can remember. And when I say since I can remember, I mean it literally, because my earliest childhood memories already have that bitter taste of being the forgotten child, you know? I guess I should start at the beginning. I'm the oldest of two siblings, well, sisters in my case, and my sister Abigail is 25. Ever since she was born, my parents, Stephen and Stephanie, basically decided she was the star of the show and I was, I don't know, like the furniture that was already there when they bought the house. Sounds dramatic, I know, but let me give you concrete examples because this isn't just a feeling, it's something I can document with specific dates and events. I was like 7 years old, I think, when I had my first birthday after Abigail. I was born. My parents bought me a grocery store cake, one of those that cost like $15, and gave me a couple of gifts wrapped kind of in a hurry. Nothing special, but whatever. I was a kid and I was happy. Fast forward 3 years to Abigail's birthday when she turned 7, the same age I had been. My parents rented out a complete party venue, hired a clown, there was a bounce house, they invited her whole class and half the neighborhood, and the cake was from an expensive bakery with 3 tiers and a princess theme. I remember standing there thinking, seriously? And when I asked my mom why my birthday hadn't been like that, she said something like, "Oh, Reese, you never asked for a big party. Abigail is more expressive about what she wants." As if a 7-year-old kid had to negotiate the budget for their own birthday party. But wait, it gets better. When I was like 10, I became obsessed with bikes. All my friends had bikes, and I wanted one desperately. My parents told me that if I wanted one, I had to save my allowance and come up with half the money. So I did it. You know? For months, I saved every penny of my allowance, didn't buy myself a single piece of candy, nothing. I saved up like $150 after half a year of sacrifice. My parents finally agreed to put in the other half and bought me a used bike from Craigslist for $300. I was happy anyway. It was my bike that I had earned through my effort. 2 weeks later, literally 2 weeks, Abigail saw my bike and started crying because she wanted one too. You know what my parents did? They bought her a brand new bike, one of those from a sporting goods store, that cost like $500. And when I asked my dad why she didn't have to save, he said, "She's younger. She doesn't understand those things yet." She was 7 at the time. I had been saving since I was 9, but whatever, I guess logic didn't apply when it came to the little princess. Things continued like that throughout my entire childhood and adolescence. In middle school, I got the lead role in the school play. I had worked super hard in the auditions and was super excited because it was a big production. The night of the premiere, literally 2 hours before it started, Abigail faked a stomachache. And when I say faked, I say it with complete certainty because I heard her telling her friend on the phone later that same night that she had lied because she didn't want our parents to go to my play. My parents stayed home with her, missed the entire show, and when I got home afterwards with my teacher who was kind enough to drive me, my mom barely looked up from the couch to say, "How did it go, sweetie?" While stroking Abigail's hair as she lay there watching TV and eating popcorn. She had nothing wrong with her, obviously. The moment that hurt me most in high school was when I got accepted into a summer program at Harvard, a competitive finance program for outstanding students. It was an incredible opportunity. I was 16 and over the moon. The program started on a Monday, and I needed someone to drive me to the airport on Sunday because the flight left at like 6 a.m. I asked my dad weeks in advance and he said yes, no problem. Turns out that same Sunday Abigail had a dance recital, one of many she had every month, nothing special. Saturday night my dad told me he couldn't take me because the recital was important to Abigail, and he didn't want her to feel bad if he wasn't there early to help her get ready. I told him my flight was literally at dawn, that he could take me and get back in time. But he just looked at me and said, "Find another way to get there. Reese, you always figure it out." I ended up taking 3 buses with my suitcase at 4 a.m. to get to the airport. I almost missed the flight. My parents didn't even ask me how I got there. College was my escape, honestly. I got accepted to a decent university with a partial scholarship that covered like 60% of tuition. I worked 2 jobs throughout college to pay for the student, rest, and my expenses. My parents contributed $0, literally zero. I graduated with honors in finance, got an amazing job at a firm in Boston right out of college, and by 27 I had bought my own house. A small house, nothing fancy. But it was mine and I had achieved it completely on my own. When I told my parents I had bought a house, my mom said something like, "That's nice, Reese," and immediately changed the subject to talk about how Abigail had started yoga classes. Abigail, by the way, never went to college, lived in my parents' basement, and worked part-time at a coffee shop. And my parents treated her like she was the greatest thing ever, like every little thing she did was a monumental achievement. I don't want you to think I hate my sister. It's not exactly like that. Rather, I had super complicated feelings. Part of me was resentful, obviously, but another part felt sorry for her because my parents had left her so dependent and spoiled that she didn't know how to function as an adult. She was 25 years old, and my parents still made her lunch for work. You know what I mean? It was sad to see. So, 3 months ago, my grandfather Raymond died. He was my mom's dad, and had been literally the only family figure who had treated me with equality. My grandmother Evelyn too, but especially Grandpa Raymond. He was always proud of my achievements. Came to my college graduation when my parents said they couldn't because Abigail had a cold, called me every month to ask how everything was going. He was a good man, worked hard his whole life, built a successful construction business, and had saved quite a bit of money. His death destroyed me. Honestly, I lost the only family member who felt like he really saw me. The will reading was like 2 weeks after the funeral. I wasn't expecting anything. Honestly, I only went because my grandmother Evelyn asked me to be there. Turns out my grandfather left $500,000 for each of his grandchildren. There were 4 of us. Total, me, Abigail, and 2 other cousins. He left each of us exactly the same amount because, according to the will, he believed in equality and wanted us all to have the same opportunities. When I heard the amount, I almost fell out of my chair. You know? $500,000 was an amount of money I hadn't even dreamed of having. I thought my parents would be happy for me, or at least neutral about it. I was so wrong. After the will reading, my parents pulled me aside, literally cornered me in the parking lot of the lawyer's building, and my dad said, "We need to talk about the inheritance." I thought he was going to say something like, "Congratulations," or "How nice that Grandpa thought of you guys," but no. He told me, and I remember it word for word because it's burned into my memory. "Your sister needs that money more than you do. You have a good job and a house. She has nothing. The fair thing would be for you to give your share to Abigail." I went blank. I couldn't process, and what I was hearing. I told him no, that Grandpa had been very clear that he wanted each of us to receive an equal amount, that had been his wish. My mom immediately started with the guilt trip, saying things like, "I can't believe you're being so selfish with your own sister," and, "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" What made me laugh in a bitter way was the "everything we've done for you" when they basically ignored me my whole life and never gave me a cent for college. I told them I wasn't going to give up my inheritance and that Grandpa's will was very clear. My dad then changed tactics and informed me that he was one of the executors of the will and that he had the authority to redistribute the funds if he saw there was inequity in the beneficiary's circumstances. Basically, he was telling me he was going to use his position to take my money and give it to Abigail regardless of what the will said. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I literally couldn't breathe properly. They were threatening to steal my inheritance, the last thing my grandfather, the only person who had loved me unconditionally, had left me. I left there shaking with rage and sadness, and the first thing I did was call my grandmother Evelyn. I told her everything between sobs and she became furious. She told me not to worry, that she was going to fix it. Turns out my grandmother knew my parents' intentions very well, better than I thought. She had already noticed signs that my parents were going to try something like this. My grandmother immediately contacted the lawyer who had drafted the will and the other 2 executors. There were 3 total. My dad was just one of them. She presented evidence that my dad had a clear conflict of interest and was trying to act against my grandfather's explicit wishes. The will had a well-written anti-contestation clause that basically said any attempt to change the terms would result in legal action and the immediate removal of the person who tried it. The other two executors, who were the family lawyer and a close friend of my grandfather's, completely agreed with my grandmother and voted to remove my dad as executor for conflict of interest. The will stood exactly as my grandfather had written it. The $500,000 was mine by right. But the family war was just beginning. My parents organized a family meeting like a week later at their house. I thought maybe they were going to apologize or at least accept the situation. How naive I was. When I arrived, the whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. My dad stood in the middle of the living room and basically gave me a public speech about how selfish and ungrateful I was, how I had betrayed my sister, how Grandpa wouldn't have wanted me to hoard resources when Abigail clearly needed them more. People looked at me with pity or disgust. I'm not sure. I got up and left without saying a word, because if I opened my mouth, I was going to explode or cry. Probably both. But that night, my grandmother Evelyn came to my house. She brought wine and we sat in my small living room, and she told me something I didn't know. Turns out my parents had tried to convince my grandfather before he died to change his will to leave everything to Abigail. They had told him I didn't need the money because I already had a good life, and that it would be fairer to concentrate the resources on the grandchildren who really needed them. My grandfather had flatly refused and had told my grandmother that he was deeply disappointed in the favoritism my parents showed. He had made his will that way, specifically to give me what my parents had never given me: equal recognition, equal opportunity, equal value. I cried all night. Not just because of the current situation, but because of everything. Because of all the years of feeling invisible. Because of all the times my achievements were minimized. Because of all the times Abigail's needs were put above mine without even a moment's consideration. I decided to confront Abigail directly. I went to my parents' house when I knew she would be alone. I asked her directly why she had never defended equality, why she had never said anything when they treated me differently. Her response surprised me. She started crying and told me she knew the favoritism wasn't fair, that she had also suffered from it but in a different way. She explained that the pressure of being the favorite was suffocating, that our parents had never let her grow or be independent, that every time she tried to do something on her own they convinced her she couldn't, that she needed them. She told me she envied me for having been able to escape and build my own life, while she felt trapped in our parents' basement without skills or confidence to leave. That conversation changed something between us. It didn't magically fix everything, but it was honest in a way we had never been. Abigail told me she didn't want my money, that she was going to use her share of the inheritance to leave our parents' house and enroll in college, something she had always wanted to do, but that our parents had sabotaged by telling her she wasn't smart enough for college and that she'd be happier staying close to home. When my parents found out about Abigail's plans, they exploded. My dad told her that if she used her money, because yes, now he was saying it was her money, to go to college, he would completely disinherit her. My mom cried and told her she was abandoning them. How could she be so cruel after everything they had sacrificed for her? The emotional manipulation was brutal to watch. My dad even threatened to sell the family home so Abigail could see the consequences of her decisions. Abigail moved into a small apartment near the university she was going to attend in the fall. I helped her with some furniture and with the enrollment process. We started meeting regularly for coffee, and little by little we rebuilt a sisterly relationship that honestly we had never had. She apologized multiple times for not saying anything during all those years, and I told her the truth, that it wasn't her fault, that we were girls in a system our parents had created. I used part of my inheritance to completely pay off my student loans, like $85,000 I still owed. I invested a good part of the rest conservatively, donated some to mental health organizations because all this had made me realize I needed therapy to process decades of emotional neglect, and created a small scholarship fund in memory of my grandfather for low-income students studying finance. The rest I kept as backup. My mom, Stephanie, started therapy like a month ago. She sent me a long message asking for forgiveness, saying she was starting to understand how her favoritism had damaged both her daughters. She asked me if we could meet to talk. I haven't done it yet. I'm not ready. But maybe someday. My dad, Stephen. On the other hand, keeps sending me occasional messages, telling me I'm a bad daughter and that I divided the family. He hasn't tried to apologize once and hasn't shown any sign of wanting to reflect on his behavior. He keeps playing the victim, saying his daughters have betrayed him. Last week, Abigail came to my house for dinner. She told me she had chosen her college major. She's going to study psychology because she wants to understand family dynamics and eventually help others who grew up in similar environments. She told me she was excited and terrified at the same time, but that for the first time in her life she felt like she was doing something for herself, not to please our parents. We toasted with cheap supermarket wine sitting on my small patio and laughed at the absurdity of it all. I don't know if I'll ever have a normal relationship with my parents, or if that's even possible. Part of me still has that inner child who wants them to see me, to value me, to truly ask for forgiveness. But another part of me, the adult part that paid for her own college and bought her own house and built her own life from scratch, no longer needs their validation in the same way. My grandfather saw me, my grandmother sees me, and now my sister sees me too. That has to be enough. What I do know is that my grandfather, Raymond, wherever he is, did exactly the right thing. He didn't just leave me money, he left me validation. He left me confirmation that I mattered just as much as everyone else. He left me the possibility of rebuilding a relationship with my sister on honest terms. That gift is worth much more than $500,000.